Hello everyone, I hope you are doing well and having a great Monday so far. In this evening's forecast update, we're going to quickly cover the ongoing severe weather event across portions of the Northeast, Mid-Atlantic, and Southeast. But in this video, we'll be mainly talking about our severe weather risk for tomorrow on Tuesday, as well as Wednesday's and Thursday's severe weather threat. But Tuesday's and Wednesday's severe weather threat will be covered in the greatest detail for this video. I will have timestamps up in the video, so feel free to skip around to any section of the video you want to see, and those timestamps will be on the little timeline bar on the video or in the description, whether y'all want to go to that or not. Feel free to skip around to any portion y'all want to see, but we'll go ahead and get started with the update for this evening. So real quick, just looking at today's severe weather threat for Monday, March 31st, 2025. And so we do have an enhanced risk here into North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia, a slight risk around that all the way from Pennsylvania and New York State down to the south, into the southeast, and into the Big Bend of Florida. And then around that in the marginal risk, the green area, all the way from New York State, Connecticut, all the way down southward to the Big Bend of Florida once again, and also a smaller area into the southeast section of the Florida Peninsula for today. And so we do have just a 5% tornado risk into these areas here, into South Carolina, Georgia, and a small, really just South Carolina and Georgia. And in the green color, we have a broad 2% risk of a tornado all the way from New York State southward into these states in between, all the way into the Big Bend of Florida for today on Monday. And then finally looking at our wind risk. And so we do have a 30% wind risk in the red color into the Carolinas and Georgia. In the yellow color, a 15% risk once again all the way from New York State all the way down to the Big Bend of Florida. Same thing with the 5% wind risk in the brown color from New York State all the way down southward into the Big Bend of Florida once again. And then a small area into the Southeast Florida Peninsula. And then finally, looking at our hail risk for today, we have a broad 5% hail risk all the way from southern New York State down to the south through the Mid-Atlantic, the southeast, and into the Big Bend of Florida once again for today's severe weather risk. So just briefly looking at the 21Z ARRR for this evening. And so if we continue this on, it looks like we will have a pretty kind of stretched out cluster of storms up here into Pennsylvania, New York State, into New Jersey as well, even into Maryland. And then as you get further to the south into Virginia and into the Carolinas as well, you could have somewhat of a line developing, or not developing, but that has already developed. But this will continue to move eastward, and there'll definitely be a hazard for damaging winds with some of these lines, as well as just the chance for brief tornadoes, a spin up or two into these areas, as well as the chance for hail into some of those areas as well. And so that kind of cluster will develop more into a line up here into the Mid-Atlantic later this evening into tonight. And you could see some more redevelopment of storms down further to the south, where you have more favorable instability into some of these areas. But that line continues to move eastward, and really by about really by late tonight, even into early tomorrow on Tuesday, you'll have some scattered showers and some storms up here into the northeast and into southern New England as well, but nothing really too strong by late tonight into early on Tuesday tomorrow. And then if we look to the southeast here into Georgia and Florida, so same story pretty much here. You still have that line kind of cluster moving through South Carolina and Georgia over the next few hours. That moves east and is off the coast by maybe around 8 or 9 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. And then further into the Florida Peninsula, you could see some storms try to linger around here. Once again, that will have the chance to produce some damaging winds as well. But most of those storms, even into the Florida Peninsula, should be out by late tonight or even into early tomorrow on Tuesday. But for the southeast, most of the showers and storms should be pretty much out of the area by late tonight and once again early tomorrow on Tuesday. And now looking at tomorrow's severe weather risk for the central U.S. for Tuesday, April 1st, 2025. And so we already have a level 3 out of 5 enhanced risk issued into Kansas here. And then we also have a level 2 out of 5 slight risk in the yellow color into Nebraska, southern Iowa, into Illinois, Missouri, Kansas, extreme northwestern Arkansas, into quite a bit of Oklahoma, and then into pretty much north central Texas for tomorrow, and then a marginal risk level 1 out of 5 surrounding that all the way from the Texas-Mexico border up to the north into southern Minnesota and into Wisconsin and into the states in between. And so looking at our tornado risk for tomorrow, we do have a 10% tornado risk into Kansas with a 10% significant tornado risk in that area with the dashed lines here, and also a 5% tornado risk as well in the brown color, all the way into Missouri, Kansas, Oklahoma, and a small section of Texas, as well as a small section of extreme northwestern Arkansas for tomorrow. And then finally, looking at our tornado risk, we have our 2% tornado risk in the green color, all the way from Nebraska, Iowa, and Illinois point south, all the way down into Texas for tomorrow. And looking at our wind risk, we do have a 30% wind risk into Kansas in the red color, the 15% wind risk in the yellow color into those states there into the central U.S., and then finally a 5% wind risk into these states here in the brownish color, all the way from Texas all the way to the north into southern Minnesota. And finally, looking at our hail risk for tomorrow, we do have a 30% hail risk into Kansas once again, and we have a 10% hatch risk into those areas, meaning a 10% or greater probability of the hail occurring in this area being significant hail. And that includes all the 30% risk and quite a bit of the 15% risk in the yellow color. And so the 15% hail risk starts into Nebraska, southern Iowa, Illinois to the south, into the states in between, all the way down into Texas. And then finally, looking at our 5% hail risk in the brown color, same story there. Once again, from southern Minnesota into southern Wisconsin, all the way down to the south into Texas once again. And that is going to be it for tomorrow's risk. So before we really start talking in more detail for tomorrow's risk on Tuesday, we're going to look at our overall kind of pattern here. And we'll be looking at the 18Z GFS, and we'll be showing the 500 millibar winds. Go back a little bit here. And we'll be able to see our trough responsible for the severe weather risk for Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. So if we continue this on and go to Tuesday afternoon, and as you can see, here's our jet streak, our 500 millibar winds in the 60, 70, and even 80 knot range across portions of the central U.S. And so this will allow storms to get going and allow them to start to develop by tomorrow afternoon and evening across portions of the central U.S. And then as you get further into the day, or excuse me, into the night, I should say, on Tuesday, and then finally into Wednesday morning, you have, again, your low pressure situated here right around the Dakotas. And then you have a pretty strong mid-level wind field here into the over 100 knot range, even up to 110 knots in some areas showing up on the GFS. And so this will be plenty enough forcing, and this allows these storms to really develop, and just is basically a mechanism that allows these storms to develop. And so without the winds being strong, or really not even strong, but even moderate, you will not have as great of a chance or widespread development of storms, I should say, as if you were to have, 100 knot mid-level jet is plenty enough to get these storms going and allow them to ventilate as well. But then if we continue this on even into Wednesday afternoon and evening, you have just a 120 knot mid-level jet up here into Wisconsin and Iowa, but the main focus will be a little bit further to the south, especially into Illinois, Missouri, Indiana. Still plenty of forcing down here, and that allows those storms to develop and get going. And then once again, our threat will continue into Thursday as well, and you'll have that mid-level jet hang around these areas, and you'll have flow from the southwest. And as you can see, here's our flow starting all the way up here into Canada, the Pacific Northwest down to the south, and that allows for that moisture as well to get pushed up as well. But the low level jet will do most of the work for that, but that also allows for some of that moisture to be transported into those areas. But those are our main couple of days we'll need to watch, and we could see probably another threat on Friday of severe weather, but the Storm Prediction Center has not issued any areas yet. But we will get to the risk areas for Wednesday and Thursday, but I'm going to try to go day by day, just like I did with the Tuesday severe weather risk. But before we do that, we will just continue to cover this just a little bit more. But finally, looking at our moisture on the 18Z GFS. And so, as you can see here, if we go to, let me go back a little bit. If we go to Tuesday afternoon, Tuesday evening, and then into Tuesday night, you have dew points well into the 60s into Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas, and dew points into the low 60s into Oklahoma and Kansas, and dew points into the 50s around that, which will be plenty enough for those storms to develop. But continuing that on into Wednesday, this will likely be, I think this will probably be a nocturnal threat for Tuesday night into Wednesday as well. You probably will have some slacking of that threat into the nighttime hours just a little bit, but you'll still have probably strong storms, maybe some severe during the nighttime hours on Tuesday into Wednesday before you have your other threat once again on Wednesday. And as you can see, you have a pretty broad warm sector here with the dew points into the lower 60s into the Ohio Valley, further to the south into the kind of upper south and deep south, dew points well into the 70s in some of these areas into Louisiana, Mississippi. You'll have your severe weather threat there further to the south, but mainly up here into the Ohio Valley. But you still have that broad enhanced risk, which we'll cover in just one second. And dew points well into the 70s here into Texas as well. But you still have that warm sector continuing into Thursday, and you'll have another threat there for severe weather. And once again, I think we'll have another one on Friday as well, with the dew points getting well into the lower 70s in some areas, showing up on the latest 18Z GFS. But we'll continue to watch trends with that, and see how this plays out. But we'll go ahead and start to discuss Tuesday's severe weather threat in a little bit more detail. Looking at the 18Z HRRR weather model here, and if we go to Tuesday afternoon and evening, you already have some kind of isolated development of storms into Nebraska and Kansas, and by this point you have your moisture well into these areas, ready for these storms to develop. And I think we could see a period of somewhat isolated storms, like the HRRR shows, maybe into Kansas Tuesday night, and that would probably be our time. We'll have to watch for our tornado threat for sure. But the HRRR wants to show a line of storms here developing from Iowa all the way to the south into Kansas and even Oklahoma. And then you have somewhat kind of a MCS showing up there for Tuesday night into Wednesday. But like I said earlier, I think we'll have, again, just the threat of severe weather going on most of the night into Tuesday night into Wednesday most of the night, and then into Wednesday you'll have your other threat a little bit further east into portions of the Ohio Valley. But if we go back a little bit here and just take a look, if we go look at our dew points here on the HRRR and see what it shows. So around that time, I mean, you have dew points into the 50s here into Missouri, Iowa, Nebraska, portions of Kansas, and so that'll be enough for those storms there. But further to the south, you have dew points into the 60s, and once again, your moisture is going to slowly start to rise up there throughout the day, and you'll have that push of moisture later into the evening and night. And those storms will be able to use that to develop. And if we look at our low-level jet for Tuesday on the HRRR, you have your low-level jet by Tuesday evening start to ramp up. And then really the period we'll have to watch is once again Tuesday evening into Tuesday night, you have a very strong low-level jet across southeastern Kansas, northern Oklahoma, and especially with any of these isolated storms, any of these discrete storms that could get going, especially right here, I would say. I mean, you have this one isolated storm. I mean, I'm not saying this isolated storm is going to be right here, but this is just what the HRRR is showing. But if we were to get somewhat of a storm mode with storms kind of out ahead, they'll be in their own little kind of environment, you could say, and those will be able to produce, have the potential to produce tornadoes for sure. If we take a sounding here on the HRRR, we'll just go a little bit further to the south. Just a incredible curve on the photograph there, supportive of tornadoes. Again, dew points in the lower 60s represented by this green line here right at the surface, and then your surface temperature about 65 degrees Fahrenheit, and plenty of CAPE into into the levels of the atmosphere. Mixed layer CAPE, well over 1,000 joules per kilogram of that. That's plenty enough. Just pretty insane SRH values here. That's basically the spin in the atmosphere kind of boiled down. And so 819 meters squared per second squared of storm relative helicity is just insane, honestly, for these areas. So if we'll continue to watch the models here, and let's actually look at the NAM real quick and see what it has to show for tomorrow. If we go to tomorrow evening and tomorrow night, so same thing. I'm not really sure why it's showing all this kind of chatter here. These I don't even know what to call that, but it's just kind of a weird look here on the NAM. Sometimes it does that. But it doesn't show any of those isolated storms like the HRRR does. So once again, we'll have to continue to watch this. This is going to be a pretty much ever-changing scenario for tomorrow, but we'll have higher confidence in the morning for sure. But it'd be a lot better of a scenario, I would think, if we do have these storms not becoming isolated out here into Kansas or Oklahoma. For sure. So the NAM does show that same thing with the line getting going, and has that line continuing all the way out into Missouri very early on Wednesday morning. And so finally we'll look further to the south. I really didn't really mention Texas that much. I do apologize for that. But we will look on the HRRR just real quick. So same thing. Here you could see development of storms Wednesday morning, but that kind of includes our Wednesday severe weather risk, but we'll get to that just in a second. But if we look at our dew points here on the HRRR, once again, you're going to have a pretty stout, pretty sharp cutoff here with your dew points, and that is called a dry line, where you have dew points see right here into the lower and mid 60s. A little bit further to the west, dew points into the 20s, and that is what you call a dry line. That's where you can get these storms to develop along this line, and instability will be pretty high along that line as well. And I'm sure that's going to be shown on the with the mixed layer CAPE here. You can obviously see that dry line right there. 2,000, 3,000 joules per kilogram of mixed layer CAPE right along, or a little bit further to the east of that dry line, but you can see the sharp cutoff there between your moist air with the mixed layer CAPE being represented by that. But again, Texas will be an area where you could see some development late Tuesday night, but I think we could see most of the development on Wednesday morning, where you have the moist sector starting to head eastward. But that's going to be about it for the discussion of Tuesday's severe weather risk. And now finally looking at our severe weather risk for Wednesday, April 2nd, 2025. And so the Storm Prediction Center has already issued a level 3 out of 5 enhanced risk all the way from, from southern Wisconsin into Michigan, all the way to the south into Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, Kentucky, Missouri, Arkansas, Tennessee, northwest Alabama, Mississippi, northern Louisiana, and northeastern Texas for once again on Wednesday. And then we have a level 2 out of 5 slight risk all the way from Michigan into Wisconsin, Ohio, down to the south, into the states in between, into Tennessee, Mississippi, Louisiana, Missouri, Oklahoma, West Virginia, into Texas there for Wednesday. And then finally, we have a level 1 out of 5 marginal risk for severe weather from Michigan, Wisconsin, out of the south, into Iowa, Missouri, Oklahoma, Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, Western North Carolina, Southwestern Virginia, Eastern Kentucky, West Virginia, Eastern Ohio, Pennsylvania, and then finally into New York State for Wednesday. And so the Storm Prediction Center did actually mention just a little bit about actually upgrading this risk for Thursday and future outlooks from the Storm Prediction Center. So I think it is quite possible we could see a level 4 out of 5 moderate risk issued with the upcoming outlooks by tomorrow. Not by tomorrow, but not necessarily tomorrow, but tomorrow or on Wednesday. I think we could possibly see a moderate risk, and the Storm Prediction Center is definitely confident in there being a pretty significant severe weather event for Wednesday. But that'll be about it for the discussion of the outlook for Wednesday. So finally, looking at the A10Z GFS, and we'll look at the European as well for Wednesday. And so if we go to Wednesday morning, you still have those storms developing all across portions of the Midwest and Ohio Valley, and then further to the south, as I mentioned earlier, with Texas and that moist sector shifting east. And so if we'll play this out a little bit here before we look at our dew points, but still just a pretty strong low pressure system here, allowing for moisture to rise up here into the Ohio Valley and Midwest and south. And then you'll go into Wednesday night, and you still could have that low pressure kind of moving off to the north, but still with your mid-level flow across these areas. Still, you could see that other risk of severe weather for Thursday, and we'll look at that in just 1 second. But going back here just for a second for Wednesday's threats here. And so if we go to Wednesday morning, still you have somewhat of a dry line across Oklahoma, southeast Oklahoma, eastern Texas, and then you have your moist, a little bit more moist air up here into the Midwest, and then your moist sector up here into the Ohio Valley and portions of the Midwest. And once again, dew points will into the 60s and 70s further to the south, especially in the deep south for Wednesday. And then by Wednesday afternoon and evening, dew points into Illinois, Indiana, Ohio into the 60s into some areas. And that'll once again be supportive of severe weather. But if you look at our low level jet again for Wednesday, you have just extremely strong low level jet into some of these areas on Wednesday in the Ohio Valley. Some areas saying a 60, 70, almost 80 knot low level jet in some of these areas, and that will be supportive for another tornado potential on Wednesday. And if you look at some of your instability across these areas, as you can see, some surface-based cape across Indiana, Ohio, further to the west as well into Illinois, Missouri, Iowa by midday Wednesday. Still a low-level jet in place there, but especially across Kentucky, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, well, where that that instability is. And so, once again, all hazards threat is definitely possible across these areas. But the tornado threat will probably be something we'll definitely have to watch and really just continue to see how it evolves. But really, that'll be all we really cover for Wednesday. And discussing that severe weather risk. And then lastly, on Thursday, April the 3rd, 2025, we have a level 2 out of 5 slight risk already issued by the Storm Prediction Center for severe weather all the way from Pennsylvania into Ohio, West Virginia, Kentucky, Indiana, Illinois, Tennessee, Northwest Alabama, Northern Mississippi, Southeastern Missouri, quite a bit of Arkansas, Northern Louisiana, Northeast Texas, and then into Southeast Oklahoma once again for Thursday. And so very quickly, same thing as we've been discussing just for a little bit, same thing for Thursday. You'll have a pretty broad warm sector, or moist sector, I should say, across quite a bit of the southeast into portions of the Ohio Valley, the southeast, yes, and then into Alabama, Mississippi, Arkansas, Louisiana, Texas, Oklahoma. Dew points into the lower 70s there for Thursday. And look at surface-based CAPE, you have plenty of instability here into the south central U.S. And even into portions of the mid-Atlantic. But you will not have, I don't think you'll have as much of a low-level jet, but you'll still have a somewhat strong low-level jet Thursday evening and Thursday night across portions of the south central U.S. and then into the upper south. And that will be overlapped with some instability, and that will allow for, once again, your severe weather risk for Thursday. So that'll be it for tonight's update. I appreciate all of y'all watching, and we'll try to have another video out probably later this week. But once again, I appreciate all of y'all watching, and I hope y'all have a great rest of y'all's Monday.